Hi, Ron. Welcome to another episode of the Consul Series 2025 here on Import Export TV. I'm your host, Lawrence Christoffelsz, part of the Global Trade Show. Now I've got the absolute pleasure of speaking to Ben Robertson, who's the Deputy Consul General over here in Western Australia. Ben, wonderful to meet you. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Lawrence. Great to be on the show.
Great. Ben, talk about your background. Tell us about yourself and how long you've been here in WA.
Sure. So I've actually been in Australia since early 2022. So I was originally posted out to our consulate in Sydney, and I was there for 2.5 years. And they've moved my role here to Western Australia, to our consulate in Perth. And that's part actually of a real investment into WA that the UK government has done. So we've had an office here for a long time, but we've not actually had a sort of a full diplomatic presence until about 1.5 years ago, when they put Maria, my boss, the Consul General, in. Yep. And they've moved my role here as her deputy. So I think it's fair to say that the importance of WA to the UK has increased an awful amount in recent years. Part of that is the trade and investment opportunities. Obviously, a big part of that is AUKUS, but also there's a lot in renewables and clean energy that WA is making a big part of their energy mix, and there's lots of opportunities for British businesses in that as well. Yeah,
wonderful. Well, I was just about to ask some of those industry sectors, but you mentioned those, and that I think the FTA now has been in place for a few years. Have you seen a greater number of interest from WA companies about wanting to explore the UK market?
Definitely. I mean, it's really interesting, the wide range of requests we get from people passing through WA, wanting to hear more from us about opportunities in the UK. As you say, it's entered into force. I think it was May 2023, so it's coming up on its 2-year anniversary. Yeah. Just to recap a bit about the FTA, it paves the way for elimination of 100% of tariffs on trade. So most of that happened when it entered into force. Some of that will be staged over the next few years. But that's sort of the headline benefit. It also paves the way for both British and Australian companies to access government contracts on the same footing as domestic companies. So I think at the time of entry into force, it was estimated there'd be up to £10 billion of Australian government contracts that UK companies would now be eligible to bid for. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And when you look at the figures and sort of work out how much is actually happening here, it's really hard to work out how much of that is services. The services figures are quite difficult, but it's certainly made it a lot easier. There's also the ability to move staff between the countries has been made easier. There's provisions on business mobility. And then also the one that lots of younger people were really happy to see was the youth mobility provisions that became a lot easier. There's lots of Brits who breathed a sigh of relief at not having to do certain work that they had to do to stay eligible and stay in Australia. So those people-to-people links, that are already pretty strong. Yeah. It's great to meet companies and people who have benefited from that in the previous couple of years since entry into force.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you say, that the ties are always strong, the sporting ties and the cultural ties, obviously quite evident there. How can Australia's typically looked to US, China, big markets, and UK has been a very service-focused market, but those other sectors you talk about, renewables, clean tech, obviously the defence sector with AUKUS, how can Australian companies who may not have been traditionally looking at the UK, how can they leverage that for that whole UK market and broader across the EU?
Yeah, so I think just to start with sort of entry into the UK, we're already in a pretty strong position in terms of investment. I mean, I think UK and Australia are the second largest investors in each other's countries, which is a nice, easy stat to remember, but also pretty remarkable as a sort of a baseline of where we're coming from. You add in all of the sort of obvious benefits about, speak the same language mostly. Yep. The favourable time zone in the UK, really deep investment market. So if you're for example, a tech startup in Australia, proven your product here, the pipeline to sort of growing often London can look quite appealing as a place to move to. I think we've got the second highest VC investment, third highest, of any country in the world. So if you're looking to scale, if you've proven your product and you're looking where do I expand to, that pipeline to the UK is often one that can be very appealing. And then, as you say, you're sort of on the doorstep to Europe. And the UK has not just negotiated a free trade agreement with Australia. We've also acceded to the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a mouthful, but opens up a whole load more markets again. So expanding to the UK can be really beneficial to then looking to sell to other markets. So it can be a real sort of stepping stone in that way, I think. Yeah.
And I know from a logistics supply chain background, there's a lot of smarts around financial services when it comes to trade and cash flow. There's a whole range of new fintech as well that's being developed between the UK.
Completely. And on the tech side as well, there's a whole range of chapters in the FTA. There's an innovation chapter which commits both governments to look at where some of these newer sectors might be coming up against outdated regulations and how they can both work to remove those trade barriers. I think there's commitments on not requiring data localization, on not putting charges on digital transactions, all of which is sort of music to the ears of a tech company that is looking, if you're Australian, looking for more UK customers, or if you're British, looking at more Australian customers.
Yeah, works well. Ben, talk about the sustainability collaboration opportunities as well, the ESGs. Again, very shared values, obviously, between Australia and the UK. What are some of the initiatives that you see there in that area?
Sure. So here in WA, I think we've got the Energy Exchange Australia conference coming up second week in March. I'm really excited to have two delegations coming out. We've got a UK Department of Business and Trade delegation, and my Scottish Development International colleagues have a group of Scottish companies coming out. And there's a whole load of opportunities. There's the sort of conventional, in a way, opportunities you think of when you think about clean tech, renewables. The UK has the world's second most installed offshore wind capacity. And for those parts of Australia that have started exploring that, there's a lot of potential there in terms of learning from the companies that have helped set that industry up in the UK. Also, actually, on the decommissioning side, which is often overlooked, the UK obviously has a lot of legacy oil and gas infrastructure, particularly off that the coast of Scotland. So Aberdeen is a centre of sort of decommissioning expertise. And I was really pleased to see the UK and Australia sign a decommissioning MOU just in December. And so part of the focus around Energy Exchange as well will be helping to bring together those industry and government representatives, because it's a relatively new opportunity to look at how best to leverage that. Develop that.
Wonderful. Yeah, and that's a major growth area for Australia to focus on, and obviously makes sense there with that UK opportunity. Finally, can you talk about some case studies, maybe even some WA case studies, Ben, about some success stories of Australian companies doing well over in the UK, or vice versa?
Yeah, sure. So I'm personally part of the reason for moving my role here is that I lead our engagement on critical minerals in Australia, and obviously much easier to do that from WA. And one of the big focuses we've got are looking at how to leverage the UK's underdevelopment industrial strategy and our new critical minerals strategy, how best to support those companies that are producing critical minerals and specifically those projects. So there's one in particular, Alchemy Capital, which have a project for a lithium refinery up in Port Hedland, with the plan for it to then feed a refinery in the northeast of England, in Teesside. And so that's a real example of a company working to actually build a diversified supply chain. And I suppose the key point there is, Australia wants more buyers and wants to develop its midstream capacity. The UK wants more options for source of supply. And, building on all the things we've already talked about, the people-to-people links, the understanding of each other's economies, and similarities in the systems there. It's a really sort of fertile ground for more opportunities like that. And in the next few weeks and months, I'm hoping to have UK Export Finance come out and talk more about they're sort of how the UK government can help finance some of these projects here in WA, where the supply would go to a UK exporter.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, that was my final question. I was going to ask what you've got in store for 2025. I know you've talked about the conference and obviously that. Any other things that you've got lined up here in WA?
So I should probably talk a bit more about defence.
Yep.
Obviously, with the massive investment in WA that federal and state government are making here to sort of get the state ready in a way for AUKUS. We've got the US and UK submarines will start sort of stopping here and rotating out. And around that, there are so many opportunities for defence companies and, you know, those sort of contractors that help with building defence infrastructure. And so we're seeing a real sort of uptick in interest and visitors from the UK. And perhaps what I've enjoyed seeing most is how many smaller and medium-sized enterprises I've met who have been signing MOUs or starting those more strategic partnerships. Because one of the real barriers I think is unique to defence is that obviously every country has their own quite rigorous requirements. But these kind of new partnerships that are being formed are ways to really sort of learn from each other, overcome some of those barriers, and both countries, both companies benefit from the trade and investment opportunities that come from that.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. I think, you know, we have so many sort of subprime supply chain companies who want to get in and are already in defence supply chains globally, and they see AUKUS as a massive opportunity. So, yeah, they were really excited. I've spoken to many of them who come through our events across the country as well, and WA is obviously a hot one for them. But I think that it has been a really stringent, as it should be, you know, pathway to get in, but there's a whole new range of opportunities with all these new projects on the way. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the subprimes are really excited to be part of that. Yeah. Great. Well, man, it's absolutely been a pleasure. I've got to ask you though, so you were in Sydney first, now you're in WA. Do you follow AFL at all? Or?
I don't actually, but on sports, we are really excited to have the British and Irish Lions. We'll do a game here before going over east. Yeah. And also, obviously, we've got the Ashes coming up at the end of the year.
I wasn't sure if I should mention that.
Well, you know, we don't have the best record necessarily, but I'm really looking forward to that, and we'll hopefully get some friends out for it as well if I can.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ben. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Well done on the role here in WA, and I'm sure you're going to be very busy with everything taking place, and hopefully we get to touch base again soon and keep track of how things are going over here.
Thanks, Lawrence. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Ben. Tut.